In Season 2, Episode 3 of The Last of Us, we were introduced to this religious cult that appeared for a small amount of time as they were wandering through the woods, and as we saw, they were executed in the most brutal of fashion. Men, women, and children. No matter who they weren't left standing. With there being a lot of questions around the identity of them, I thought I'd share a bit of a backstory on the religious cult known as the Seraphites and explain what we could potentially expect to see from them as the show develops. So let's get into it. Here is The Last of Us Season 2, The Seraphites Explained. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. The origin of the cult and religion. The origin of the Seraphites is based on a woman that had a vision which told her to live a type of life that allowed her and humankind to live off the land and no longer be reliant on the creature comforts and technological advancements that over the years humans became extremely used to. Within this vision, it's also said that she saw the cordyceps outbreak as well. This means that the Seraphites are agricultural, they don't carry many material possessions, and they have a real sense of community amongst them. The world advancing with technology and the wrongs that the humans were carrying out is something that they believed could have been why the world fell to its knees. Whilst what we saw in the episode showed that they didn't come across as violent and that they used distance as their best approach to being safe, that wasn't the case with the person that created the religion. This woman who had the vision was called the Prophet, and she was said to have great fighting skills and was able to fight off the infected in the early days of the cordyceps outbreak, so that was a key part of the cult's initial survival. When spreading her beliefs and views and showing people the ways that she felt humankind needed to live, groups started to form where they followed her ways and were living off of the land because she and the others believed that the cordyceps outbreak was a punishment from God, and the pandemic was humanity being punished for all of the bad things that they'd done throughout their existence. Almost as if they'd taken too much and it was now time to revert back to the way that things used to be many years ago. The outbreak was almost seen as some kind of reset on the earth for humans and for them to return to their natural ways. When it came to the beliefs that they followed, they were large advocates of not using any technology or equipment that was present from before the outbreak, which meant that a true reset was present for all of them. This is why there was a polar contrast in the difference between the type of weaponry that they had when compared to the likes of Wolf and even the residents in Jackson. The Seraphites didn't have the means for advanced warfare, or even warfare of the current time. They tended to use bow and arrows, hammers, and clubs, all things that they could make off of the land. So when we do eventually see them fighting Wolf in the show, as I imagine we're going to get some kind of flashbacks, it'll be interesting to see how they face off against them. As you'd imagine that modern warfare fighting against medieval type warfare is something that would just cause a complete annihilation. With what we saw in the most recent episode, I imagine it's going to be that, but on a larger scale. The Seraphites' feud with Wolf throughout the years. The Seraphites' feud with Wolf is something that I feel is going to be explored in the show, because it will be a way of allowing us to learn more about Isaac Dixon, the death of the Seraphites' prophet from 10 years ago, which was hinted at in episode 3, and also more about the history of the religion. The Seraphites originally wanted to live in peace with Wolf. However, as time went on, Wolf and the cult got into disagreements about territory and who had the right to certain parts. With both looking to hold on to the same territory, the Seraphites gradually started expanding and moving closer to the city, and from there, many of the residents that were in the areas that they took over joined Wolf, and they shared the same mindset in wanting to fight back against the Seraphites. This was due to the disruption and chaos that was being caused with them spreading their beliefs and taking over the area. The Seraphites bore witness to what would happen to their people if they were to be found by Wolf, and it was murder. This is why I imagine we saw them panic and hide away in fear when it was signaled to them that they were being followed. They hid because they knew what would happen if they were to be spotted, and they knew that with the weapons that they had, compared to Wolf, which was contrasted with tanks and modern weapons, they just didn't stand as much of a chance. Hence why the Seraphites tend to use surprise attacks when going on the offense, because if their actions are predicted or heard, then they can be taken out from afar. Within the story, when tension with Wolf became increasingly larger, with the impending conflict that was on the horizon, the Seraphites brought it upon themselves to build an army. This army was pitted against Wolf whilst the Prophet was alive, once she was captured, and then also during and after her death. However, it was once the Prophet was killed by Isaac Dixon, Wolf's leader, the character that we're most likely going to be introduced to in episode 4 of season 2. He did this because he believed that she was too dangerous to be kept alive. This was where the Seraphites' approach changed slightly due to them now having an even greater reason to fight, and also changing their mindset in making the Prophet this messiah-type figure after her death, as she became somebody that they worshipped due to her sacrificing themselves for them and their cause. The Seraphites' appearance and their scars. The appearance of the Seraphites is one that's extremely unique and recognizable. They wear these green-type robes, and both men and women wear the exact same clothing. The main difference between the men and the women, though, is that the men shave their heads and their facial hair, and the women are able to keep their hair, but it has to be braided. With green being the choice of color for the robes that they wear, it seems like this has been chosen deliberately so that when they're wandering and changing location, most likely putting distance between themselves and the likes of Wolf, they're able to blend in with the environment and the greenery that's around them to avoid them being spotted. One key thing across all of them is that they have scars on the side of their cheeks, which is known as the Chelsea smile and also the Glasgow smile. This is done for a couple of different reasons. One of the first reasons that it was done was when an army was being built to be pitted against Wolf. There was a special ceremony that consisted of an initiation process where the cuts would be done to the soldiers that were made part of the army and showed that they were committed. Another reason for these scars, which were made a custom part of the religion as we saw them present on the likes of Constance, a young girl that was a Seraphite in episode 3, is that they have these scars because there's a connection to the deeper meaning of the religion and something that the Prophet said where she mentioned how humankind was imperfect, and the scars being present on a follower's face represented that. The Seraphites' fighting style. When it comes to the fighting style of the Seraphites, they tend to focus on weapons which don't make much noise and are easy to transport around due to the nature in which they move. This is why we saw them with hammers and a bow and arrow. They focus more so on close combat and anticipate working towards surprise attacks. This is why there's such a focus on their weaponry making the least amount of noise possible. The fact that they wear green also allows them to blend into the environment and rely more on stealth than brute force and charging. Naturally, due to the style that the Seraphites have, they've fallen victim to attacks from Wolf over the years. Hence why there was fear that was present within them when they were being followed, and why we also saw the leader of the group mention how Wolf were the most evil thing that they could hide from. So history definitely plays a large part in their mindset and their decision to focus on evading rather than being upfront and fighting. I imagine we're going to see flashbacks in episode 4 of the show, which will show us exactly how the Seraphites fight when up against Wolf, and maybe even their first encounter with Fedra when they were first found. The Seraphites are definitely an interesting group of characters that provide a bit of contrast and an insight into a different belief system that was somewhat adopted in the post-apocalyptic world, but one that you could imagine would be formed in a time of struggle. People turned to religion, and the idea that there could be this prophet that was out there that saw the cordyceps outbreak and viewed it as a punishment from God. Some people would definitely believe that. So, there you have it, The Last of Us Season 2, The Seraphites Explained. If you want to see every episode of The Last of Us Season 2 being broken down, then check the playlist below. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future videos. What do you think of Season 2 so far? Share your thoughts in the comments. As always, thanks for tuning into the video, and I'll see you in the next one.